Oh boy. A lot of people on so-called black YouTube are stupid as a motherfucker. Too many dumbass people. And people often show how dumb they are when it comes to speaking about certain topics, especially when it comes to the whole biracial mixed topic. I mean, for the past few years on so-called black YouTube, a lot of people are obsessed, especially a lot of fake pro-blacks are obsessed with speaking about the whole whether or not so-called biracial or mixed people are black are considered black. You know, are biracials black people or are they not? If you're mixed, are you black or are you not? You know, yeah, Jersey Hammer, yes, Jersey Hammer, yeah. I I know this gets on your nerves too. I get it, Jersey. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, Jersey. Yeah, it is so fucking stupid. Um, and what inspired me to make this video is that right now I was listening to a live from Sweet Melody Speaks, right? And I'm listening to some of the people speaking on her panel, and likewise, I'm reading comments from the people in the chat. And on both sides, all I hear and read is a bunch of ignorance. Ignorance, filled with people who just go by their own opinion instead of going by actual facts. Like people that don't read. I mean, you could tell when people do not do consistent research nor consistently read when they just by the statements that they make. Now let me attack this shit when it comes to um whether or not so-called biracial people whether or not so-called biracial people are considered black. All right. I mean, it's very simple. If someone is supposedly mixed with, someone is supposedly mixed with one so-called black parent and a parent and another parent who's non-black, and in this society they're considered to be biracial, right? Now, when someone believe that a biracial person of that type is not black, they're actually contradicting themselves. Because when you saying that if someone is a so-called mixed black person, if they're biracial with one so-called black parent, right? And you say that they're not black, that's a contradiction. Because when you call someone biracial, you're actually acknowledging that they belong to both of the races that they're mixed with. Therefore, if one of the races that they're mixed with is black, then they are black, right? But they also belong to that other non-black race that they're mixed with. That's what biracial means. The word bi, the root of the word biracial is bi, bi. Bi stands for two. When you call someone biracial, you're saying that they belong to two races. Therefore, they are so-called black people. They just happen to be also members of another race of people. Not only that, but people happen to forget that when it comes to race, we have to define what is race. What is race? Once again, and I made this definition in one of my previous videos, right? Race is a subgroup of human beings based upon genetics, right? Or phenotype, which means if you share a specific genetic trait, then you belong within a certain race of people or subgroup of human beings. If you have horse textured hair, highly melanated skin, a broad nose, thick lips, you belong in the racial group or the subgroup that we now call black, right? Or negroid or negro or what have you. If you happen to have not so melanated skin, and you have a straight textured hair, thin lips, a long pointy nose, you belong to the Caucasoid racial group, right? And so forth. Race is defined by the subgroup of human beings that people belong to based on their genetic traits. That is it. That's what race is. So therefore, if someone have parents that belong in two different genetic subgroups of human beings, that child belong to both of these races. Once again, when we speak about race, we're speaking about the genetic subgroup of human beings that people belong to. So race is purely genetic, purely biological. It's about biology. It has nothing to do with culture. Culture is dealing with ethnicity. It has nothing to do with what society may label them to be. It has nothing to do with what you think they are. And my problem with the whole biracial and mixed argument, that people are not basing this argument on a biological or genetic they're not looking at it from a genetic or biological point of view. You know what I'm saying? They are strictly looking at it from a subjective point of view. They're looking at it from how society, for what they assume society is looking at things. They're not looking at it from a purely biological point of view. Because when you look at race for what it is, which deals with biology, it's not hard to determine whether a so-called biracial or mixed person is a so-called black person or not. What's going on, everybody? Jersey Hammer, Bronzebird, Jessica X, what's up? I mean, it's too many stupid people on here, man. A lot of people on here are fucking stupid. You know? I mean, I mean, it's yeah. What's up? Bronze will say, yeah, it's entertaining at this point. At this point, it's entertaining. What's going on? LSP, the Redbone artist. What the? How you doing? How you doing? I'm sorry to laugh. I just think the name sounds funny. I'm sorry, but how you doing? Thank you for being here, LSP. Thank you. All right. Yeah, but yeah. I just find this shit so damn stupid. You know, it's and it's like, yeah, and it's like, dude, what's so and another? Oh, I'm sorry. Another thing too is that a lot of people on here, I realize that a lot of people on here have this dichotomous mentality where they think that everything's a dichotomy, where they think that everything has to be mutually exclusive from one another, where things are just one way. You know, they don't have the mentality where two things could be true at the same time. Like, they don't have this mentality when it comes. Now, for example, when it comes to this whole biracial mixed argument, right? It's hard because a lot of people think within a dichotomy. It's hard for them to look at biracial and mixed people as both so-called blacks and whites at the same time. Because they think in a dichotomy, they believe that Either you are black or you not black. And it's like the world is more complex than that. You know, I mean, once again, when you look at race from what it is, which is just biological, genetic, it's not hard for you to determine that a person who is of two different races belong to both races of people. If you're only going to look at it, if you look at it for just simply a biological point of view, you know? Okay, it says it used to be the golden artist. I have nothing to do with the golden sphere anymore. Sorry. No, you don't need to apologize. I mean, it's cool. It's cool. It's cool. I mean, I just found the name kind of funny. I don't know. You know? Yeah. But then once again, you have people when they determine someone's race, they look at it from a cultural point of view. You know, when they see a so-called biracial person, they look at it and they look at it from a point of view based on what would they be considered culturally. And people still have a hard time understanding that when it comes to culture, culture has nothing to do with race. Culture deals with ethnicity. Ethnicity and race are two different things. Race deals with purely race deals with biology. It's pure biology. That's it. It's nothing less than that. Culture deals with ethnicity. Okay? Within a race of people consists of many different ethnicities. So when you're trying to look at a person's race from a cultural perspective, you can't do that. It it's almost, it's almost like how could I explain it? Well, I can't explain it any I can't simplify it any further. You know, when it comes to race, you're supposed to look at it for what it is, which is from a biological point of view. That is it. Race deals with biology. That's it. So when you determine someone's race, you have to look at them biologically. That's it. Biology deals with genetics. Genetics deals with what you have inherited from your parents, right? I mean, and not only that, and when you want to break, and if you break it down, we already know this. I mean, what I'm about to say is basically common sense. We already know this, but we should not be having this biracial mixed argument when the reality is the majority of so-called black people in the Western Hemisphere are not even fully black. Like most of us have some sort of mixture in our family tree. I mean, rest in peace to the comedian Paul Mooney. I remember when Paul Mooney, he said this on on one of his stand-up shows. He said this about Caucasians. He said, when you shake a white person's family tree hard enough, a nigger will fall out. Well, guess what? You can say the same thing about a so-called black person's family tree. If you shake it hard enough, a cracker gonna fall out, or some Native American gonna fall out, or some Asian motherfucker gonna fall out, or some East Indian gonna fall out. I mean, we should not be having this fucking mixed biracial argument when the majority of so-called black people within the Western Hemisphere are not even fully black. We're not. Due to historical circumstances, on a genetic level, we're not 100% black people. So we're all mixed. So it's like, so once again, I see the hypocrisy. You got mixed people pointing at another group of mixed people saying that they're not black because they happen to have more mixture than they do. Like, Yo, you can't make this shit up, son. Ellie, it's so fucking stupid, man. It's so stupid. But then now we have this thing where people consider mixed people or so-called biracials as a separate race. But I'm saying, okay, if they're a separate race, then you have to utilize another label outside of biracial. Because when you call someone biracial, you're not calling them a separate race. You're actually acknowledging that they belong to multiple races of people. So you're not making them a separate race of their own when you utilize that word. But people don't see that. A lot of people are stupid. A lot of people in so-called black YouTube are stupid. A lot of you motherfuckers need to put the marijuana down, put down the Hennessy, put down the damn Xanax pills or the Percocets, put it down, go to therapy. And at the same time, pick up a book and read. Read. Because a lot of you motherfuckers are dumb as hell. You're dumb. Okay, Sigma American Arcana says white folk tend to more often refer to biracials as black, no matter what, but they treat biracials better. Black folk tend to claim biracials when they do something that makes black folks proud. Oh, okay. Well, I don't care. I don't care. No. I don't give a fuck. But the whole biracial mixed argument that a lot of people in these YouTube streets are having is just stupid. It's just very stupid. Because it's not based, like a lot of these arguments is not based on any type of scientific research. It's not even based on any type of wisdom. It's not even based on any type of common sense. A lot of it is purely based upon people's subjective point of view. It's like, I don't consider biracials to be black because I feel as though I don't consider mixed people to be so-called black people because I feel as though I don't believe they're so-called black people because Caucasian people tend to do this. I don't consider them to be so-called black people because, it's like, okay. Have anyone try to use anything based upon science or biology to determine whether they're black or not? Because if you look at things from a purely biological standpoint, you have no choice but to consider them to be black. Okay. Not only that, most so-called black people, especially on YouTube, right? We all can acknowledge that so-called black people have dominant genes, right? We have dominant genes. If we agree with that, which is actually scientifically proven that so-called black people have the most dominant genes, since we believe that, it is fair to believe that if a so-called black person has children with a non-black person, 9 times out of 10, that child will have a lot of biological features or phenotypical features that we consider to be Negroid, right? Because since our genes are more dominant, our features are going to stick out more than ever, right? But if we say that a child of a so-called black person and a non-black person is not black, what we're saying is that after one generation, a black person is just wiped out the map. Thus, we're saying that our genes are not dominant, which goes contrary to actual science. If so-called black people are genetically dominant or considered the most genetically dominant race, within the human species, then our children, our offspring, whether we have with another black person or not, will be a so-called black person too. Because if we say that if we have our offspring with a non-black person and our offspring is not black, we're saying that our genetics is wiped out. Therefore, going against the fact that we have dominant genes. Basically, you're saying that so-called black people have recessive genes. If our genes could be wiped out after one generation based on the belief that biracial or mixed people are not black, then we're saying that our genes are not dominant. We're saying that black people have recessive genes because only people who are genetically recessive can have their genetic their genetic traits wiped away after like one generation or something. And even that's not even true. Because it takes more than one generation for people who are genetically recessive to have their race wiped away. I mean, am I going crazy? I mean, anybody in the comment section, for those of you who still watching, am I bullshitting? Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Am I bullshitting or what? Am I just some motherfucker who don't know what he's talking about? Like, what is it? You know, if we're going to say that a so-called black person who has an offspring with a non-black person, their child will not be black. What we're saying is that our race can be wiped away after one generation, which means that we're not genetically dominant. That's the danger when you say that mixed people and biracial people are not black. You're saying within the same breath, you're also saying that black people can have their race wiped away after one generation, which means that we're not genetically dominant, which means that according to that theory, we're genetically recessive. This is what you're saying when you say that the biracial mixed people are not black. A lot of you people who make that argument are just basing it on your feelings. You're not basing things on a purely scientific approach. You're not looking at it on a purely scientific approach. You're just looking at it with your feelings, or you're looking at it from what you think society is looking at things. And if anybody knows anything about society, like modern day Western society, one thing we should know is that society is wrong on a lot of things. All right. So to look at things from what we think society is looking at things is just purely ignorant. If we're going to speak about things like this, we have to look at it from an educated approach. We have to take an educated approach to things. Because if we're talking about race, we're talking about biology. So if we're going to talk about, so that's what we're going to talk about, right? Let's use evidence based on biology to prove our point. If you're going to say that so-called mixed people or biracial people are not black, what scientific proof do you have to back that up? And if you're going to say that, does that mean that you believe that black people can be wiped away as a race if they mix with a non-black person after one generation? And if you believe so, then does that mean that we're not genetically dominant? Does that make us genetically recessive? Once again, if I have a child with a non-black person and my child, according to your standards, will now be considered non-black. This means that I don't have recessive genes. Excuse me. This means that I don't have dominant genes. This means, according to that theory, that I have recessive genes. This means that I, as a so-called black person, have genetics that are so recessive that my race can be wiped out after one generation of mixing with a non-black person. This is why the whole biracial is not black argument is fucking pathetic. And listen. I don't even consider myself to be a fucking genius, okay? I'm just a regular nigga. And if a regular nigga like me can point out the many discrepancies to this argument, what does that mean? It means that the argument makes no sense. So this argument should be done. You know, exactly. We've been mixing for 4 centuries and it's all the same shit. We still here. We've been mixing for 4 centuries and we're still here. You know? Okay, but okay. Sigma American Arcana, you say historically whites and Arabs have used biracials as a buffer class against blacks. Chancellor Williams did a great job documenting this in writings. Sigma, that has nothing to do with my argument. My argument has nothing to do with what you just said. My argument is our so-called are biracial or mixed people, or mixed people are black. That's my argument. You know, I mean, if you really think about it, Caucasians have used other so-called black people as a buffer class against their own kind. They've used so-called quote unquote mixed people as a buffer class to go against their own kind. I mean, divide and conquer comes in all different phases. I mean, even in other parts of the world, Caucasians have used other Caucasians as a buffer class to go against other Caucasians. I mean, but that has nothing to do with my argument. My argument is, are biracial people considered black? Yes or no? That's my argument. Exactly, Brownsburg. So-called African Americans are not even pure. Hell, so-called Afro-Caribbeans are not pure. So-called Afro-Latinos are not even pure. We're not a pure race of people. You know? I mean, am I the only one who have actually asked these questions? That if so-called biracial people are not black, right? Then what does that mean when it comes to black people being genetically dominant? If it is possible for the so-called black race to be wiped away after one generation of interracial mixing, does that mean that black people have recessive genes? Because if we're genetically dominant, as science have proven this, then likewise, that means our genetics still live on no matter what race of people we mix with. Which means that biracial people who have at least one black parent are so-called black people. And I'm just looking at it strictly from a scientific point of view, not based on my own personal feelings, not based on what society might say, not based on what society believe, not based on whether a so-called mixed person's skin complexion is very light or very dark. I'm just looking at it strictly from a scientific point of view. If so-called black people supposed to have dominant genes, in which science have proven this. But engage in interracial mingling, right? And their offspring are now considered a different race of people. Does that mean that black people have recessive genes? Because if, once again, if I, as a so called black person, have a child with a non black person and my child is not considered black, then by that logic, it is impossible for me to have dominant genes. By that logic. By that logic, this means that my genes are recessive. This is one of the biggest discrepancies with the whole biracials are not black argument. But you know, and then when it comes to the golden sphere, I mean, there's a new online community called the Golden Sphere. I mean, it's funny how now we have all these spheres on here. We have all these spheres on here. I mean, I anyhow, right? But to a degree, I do overstand and understand why there's a golden sphere, even though I think it's stupid, but I do overstand and understand why, because it exists as a result of these colorist crybabies making all these derogatory statements towards so-called mixed and biracial people and lighter complected people, to the point of fact that certain biracial, so-called biracials and mixed people on here feel disenfranchised. So they say, fuck it, we're going to make our own online space. And also, you got to blame the fake pro-blacks too, because the fake pro-blacks, who a lot of them follow that colorist bullshit, that colorist crybaby doctrine, they got derogatory things to say about lighter complected black people and so-called mixed breed people. Therefore, I understand why there is a golden sphere. For those of you that don't know what the golden sphere is, the golden sphere is an online community that was created by people who are quote unquote biracial or mixed or lighter complected people, because they feel disenfranchised by the greater black YouTube population. Thus, they make their own online space to uplift lighter complected and or mixed or biracial black people. So I get it why this exists, but it's still stupid. It's still stupid. It's still a way to cause just greater greater separation among so-called black people. Listen, obviously, when you look at my picture, you see that I'm not the darkest brother out there. I've never been the darkest brother out there. And, I've heard, people have cracked light skin jokes on me and shit like that. And I've heard the whole little, light skin arguments on here, especially me being a so-called light skinned black male, growing up in the inner city. People thought that because I was lighter complected, that I was soft, that, I couldn't fight and all this other bullshit. So, I went through that shit, but, it didn't make me feel that I need to separate myself from, the rest of the black population. It just showed me that just some black people were just ignorant. And, when I hear people make these ignorant statements about lighter skinned people, just don't listen to them, and just move on. Fuck it. Shit. Fuck it. Anyhow, yo, I was just rant. This is just my rant. This is just my little rant. Damn. All right, I'm out of here, man. Shit. Motherfuckers just too damn stupid. Oh, boy. All right, man. Y'all have a great night.